Please welcome General Partner at Andreessen Horowitz, Alex Rampell.
And we call it a super cycle because if you think about the three, not to be guilty of hyperbole, arguably the two biggest changes for all of mankind were first the agricultural revolution, where people went from hunter-gatherers to now having farms and being a lot more efficient by farming. And then the one that really changed human standards of living for a very long time was the Industrial Revolution, starting in the mid-1700s. And we think as a firm, and we're investing a lot of money behind this thesis, that AI is going to be the third, and we're very excited about it. So I'm going to start off with a little clip from a movie from the 1980s that many of you might recognize, and I'll explain why this makes sense. Why am I quoting a supervillain of Gordon Gekko here? But let's play this clip, and then I'll explain a little bit more.
Our paper has 33 different vice presidents, each earning over $200,000 a year. Now, I have spent the last 2 months analyzing what all these guys do, and I still can't figure it out. One thing I do know is that our paper company lost $110 million last year, and I'll bet that half of that was spent in all the paperwork going back and forth between all these vice presidents.
So, this obviously was from the 1980s, which was not really an era of building new things. In many cases, it was taking companies that weren't being run very efficiently and trying to make them more efficient, just by getting rid of sclerotic processes and whatnot, such as at Teldar Paper. And the really exciting thing about AI is that it's not that at all. It's really, it's the history of AI, and this is not a new term, of artificial intelligence, ML is machine learning, is not new. Like I worked at, I started a company that was bought by Visa. We used machine learning all the time to identify fraud. Like, is this transaction real or not real? And you can't have a human look at that at all times. You would have this done in the machine implemented way. Or anybody here who's used Amazon, when it says people who bought this also bought that, that's a form of machine learning. If Starbucks is opening a new location, they want to ingest in all sorts of foot traffic and map data to figure out where to open the new location. They're not just using human intelligence. That is where AI and machine learning historically, until about 2 years ago, if you said, I'm using AI or machine learning, like that's probably what you meant, something like one of these four things. And what's exciting right now is that what I would call this, anything involving bit manipulation can be automated. And what does bit manipulation mean? Like, if I need to move a couch from this side of the room to that side of the room, that's not manipulating bits, that's manipulating atoms. That I have to physically lift something, that's hard. But if I need to, if I need to change my flight at United Airlines and talk to a customer support representative who's just answering questions back and forth, again, that's actually bit manipulation. Or if I want to buy a product and I have a lot of questions for a salesperson and the salesperson's answering questions back and forth over email, that's bit manipulation. If I have a question if I'm the CEO of a big company and I want to know, like, how many units of this did I sell last year? And I ask somebody who works for me and that person asks somebody else, all of that is bit manipulation. And this is what AI means today. We call this generative AI because it's actually generating responses. It's figuring out what should I tell you based on all of this information that I've ingested. And it's really, this is kind of the limit of this technology, is it's not about, do I stop fraud? Do I allow this transaction? It's anything involving bit manipulation. And consequently, the way that we think about this is in terms of where the business impact will be. You can kind of broadly think of it as two different types of businesses. There are atoms businesses like Lockheed Martin. I think this is the F-17 or F-18 or something. It's some very complicated, expensive plane. Lockheed Martin assembles atoms. Like, they have to buy titanium, aluminum, weld them together, and they have a 13% gross margin. Salesforce is a $200 billion plus public company, and they make software. So almost all of their costs are people, engineering, sales, customer experience, customer support, and that's a 73% gross margin business. And what's actually kind of interesting is if you read science fiction from 50 or 100 years ago, the theory was that in the future, the robots will do all the work. Like, you won't have to fold laundry, You won't have to clean your house. You won't have to do your dishes. All of that will be done by robots. And I can't wait for that day to happen. That's not what's happening right now. What happened in these science fiction books when the robots were folding your laundry and whatnot is that you would have humans would write poetry, paint, do all sorts of fun, creative things. And actually, that's what this AI is very good at. It's actually good at the creative things. If I say, hey, I want a picture of a vase that looks very pretty and looks like it's from the 18th century, and I give that to an AI thing, boom, I get a picture 2 seconds later. It painted it for me. Whereas, unfortunately for everybody, including myself, folding laundry is still a very human ordeal. So where are the biggest bit industries? And this is a question that we ask ourselves. Again, it's not making planes, but Boeing and Lockheed Martin will not be impacted by AI that much. It's things like financial services. Financial services is about 20% of all GDP. And unless you're sending physical gold in the mail, it's entirely bits. Like you get approved for a loan, you send money, all of this stuff is just bits moving back and forth. In some cases between 20 vice presidents before the actual transaction happens. Education, I mean, obviously education, I'll talk about this a little bit later in the presentation, but education, sometimes if you're 3 years old, a lot of times it's a supervisory thing where somebody actually needs to supervise the kids and make sure that they don't, set things on fire and whatnot. But in terms of learning things, like how do I learn something? How do I have an individualized instructor? I'm very confused about quantum mechanics and how this works and how that works. Can you explain it to me? And again, this is bit manipulation, and AI does a great job of this. Translation, there are hundreds of languages on Earth, and it's really amazing. There's a company called 11 Labs that does real-time voice translation in your own voice. So I can make myself, we could record this presentation, and out the other end comes me, Alex, with my lips moving, speaking fluent German. It's really incredible. And again, this is something that it just was cost prohibitive before it. Support, I mentioned, support, most people, if you think about measuring net promoter score, why do people have a bad experience with the business? In some cases, it's because they waited on hold for 2 hours, they got the wrong answer, they had bad support. And again, this is really bit manipulation at the end of the day. If you're calling somebody or talking to somebody over email, it turns out AI can do a better job of this than people. So the way that I came to this conference was actually I gave this presentation to the Rocket Board of Directors, and now I'm on the Rocket Board of Directors. And I kind of gave this example from Rocket, where Rocket is a bit manipulation company. Again, they're not sending out physical gold ingots. The biggest cost is salaries, commissions, team member benefits, G&A expenses. And actually, it's kind of useful to talk about something that people worry about, which is like, oh, AI is going to replace all the jobs, which is not true at all. I mean, like when the United States was founded, 99% of people in the US worked in agriculture, and now that number is not 99%. The key thing is actually AI makes people more productive. We recently invested in a company that does AI nurses. And what does an AI nurse do? It's not the phlebotomist who's taking your blood. It's I have a colonoscopy tomorrow, and somebody needs to call me at 10 p.m. to remind me not to eat food, which is very important to do. Don't eat food if you have a colonoscopy. And they actually do call you. The problem is there's a nursing shortage. You can't hire. There aren't enough trained nurses. Like if rates go down for Rocket, they need to hire a ton of people that they can't hire in 24 hours. And it turns out that AI can make people much, much more productive. Or here's another company. This is a title insurance company. Again, a bit manipulation company, if you will. The majority of costs are personnel, premiums retained by agents. And again, this doesn't mean that these people go away. It actually means that they can be augmented and be so much more productive, like what the tractor did for agriculture, or what the mill did for clothing manufacturing. I mean, this is a lot of what AI will do for businesses. And again, like we think the enterprise implications here really are massive. It's everything from content creation. Like I need a website tomorrow that has lots of content that customers will like, because if I'm a business, I can't just write buy this and then call it a day with a period. I need to have lots of content there. There are lots of teams that do that. It takes months sometimes, and now boom, you can do it immediately. Task acceleration is kind of a catch-all, but if you think about what a lot of white-collar workers do, they paste something from Microsoft Excel into an email, they send it to their boss, they get a response 2 weeks later, then they paste it back into Excel, they send it to a customer. There's all sorts of stuff that actually is very, very manual, very boring, not fun for humans to do. You can probably speed this up by giving it to AI. Customer support I've talked about, we think this is going to be huge. IT and engineering, like if you are a software engineer, a lot of what you do if you have a problem that you don't know how to solve is you go to Google, you type in the particular thing that you're trying to solve. You probably go to a website called Stack Overflow that has a lot of engineers talking about other problems that they can't solve. You find the code sample that you were looking for, you copy it, and then boom, you paste it into your code editor. And there's a tool called Copilot, which is part of GitHub, which is one of, it's owned by Microsoft. It's a big kind of code repository. People just don't do that process anymore. They no longer go from Google to Stack Overflow. It's just like, boom, the code shows up and it saves you hours as an engineer. It's amazing. Legal, like the job of paralegals will change and become a lot easier. And this will, again, like manifest in cheaper rates for customers. So pretty much anything involving bit manipulation, not atom manipulation, but bit manipulation will be dramatically changed. The way that we think about this as a firm is, to quote the late great Donald Rumsfeld, there are the known knowns, the things that we know, the known unknowns, the things that we know that we don't know, and I'll explain what each one of these means. And then the unknown unknowns, it's like you just can't predict these things. You can only observe them, but you can't predict them. This is how we think about our investing is, take Rocket Mortgage as the example that I gave. There are kind of three things that, and obviously I'm very bullish on Rocket, that's why I'm on the board, but there are three things that are kind of AI opportunities. One is there will be net new companies that sell software to firms like Rocket Mortgage that make all of this, the kind of manual processes become more AI first. There will probably be net new companies that try to compete with Rocket Mortgage. And then the reason why I started off with the Gordon Gekko quote is I think there will be, this is probably a new era of private equity as well, where people will start buying companies that aren't very efficiently run. They won't go like corporate raider style like Gordon Gekko or Ivan Boesky or whoever actually did that back in the 1980s. They won't do that. It will be, how do I inject real technology or better technology to take a company that isn't doing great, that maybe has slowing growth, that can't operate profitably, and then inject AI and make it more profitable. So it's kind of, I wrote a blog post about this and I called it Barbarians at the Gate, but with an AI instead of BAIR, talking about this. And just kind of a couple, like we think of the known knowns as very obvious areas. Like Harvey is a company that does AI for law firms. So I'm sure everybody here has heard of or used ChatGPT. Works pretty well, but if you are a paralegal, you need specialized tools to find you particular case law and look up in case text and all the other particular sites. Like I want to find a Supreme Court ruling that said X and write a memo about it. You give that to Harvey and then boom, it does that. PhotoRoom, now this is a company that has $100 million in revenue, up from zero a couple of years ago. It removes shadows from photos. And this is a task that would take humans hours to do in Photoshop, and now it happens instantly. Jasper is one of the companies in content creation. So we're seeing these companies pop up that go from, in many cases, $0 to $100 million of revenue very, very quickly. Kind of obvious ideas. These are obvious ideas in that, humans already do this thing. It takes them a lot of time, and this does it more productively and more quickly. You already have businesses like this, but it just, again, does it more productively and quickly. The area that we think is most interesting as a venture capital firm, in terms of like where a lot of the returns will be, is what I call the known unknowns. And anybody who's studied economics probably recognizes this slide. You have the downward facing demand curve, which means that the quantity increases as the price goes down. And then you have the upward facing supply curve, which means that as the price goes up, more people want to supply. And kind of as an example here, like probably Louis Vuitton probably spends $100 million a year fighting counterfeit goods. $100 million a year. What does that actually mean? They probably spend a lot of money on law firms sending out cease and desist letters and all sorts of expensive things like that. How many small merchants in the United States would want that exact same service? Like, hey, anytime you find a counterfeit good or somebody doing something wrong, I want you to take them down. Probably every merchant in the US would want that, but how many can afford $100 million a year? Zero. If you bring down the price dramatically, you actually have an incredible business that you wouldn't have thought. You can't point to a competitor that does this right now. There's no cease and desist service or personal assistants. How many people in this room would love to have a personal assistant that writes thank you notes for your kids' birthday parties and books travel for you and calls restaurants to make sure that your seat is still reserved and all this kind of stuff? Probably everyone. Would you want to spend $100,000 a year on that? Probably no one. If it's $10 a month, it might turn out that everybody wants that. And that's kind of how we think about this category of known unknowns. And to give an example here, there are two websites, these are public companies actually, Upwork and Fiverr. They both have graphics design marketplaces where you can hire a graphics designer for $15 to $35 an hour. And probably collectively, they do about $100 million in revenue finding you graphics designers for $15 to $35 an hour. But again, most people don't want to spend $15 to $35 an hour on a graphics designer, and most graphics designers don't want to work for 1 penny per year. So there was this funny graphic that came out maybe 6 or 9 months ago where this was Pope Francis wearing a poofy jacket, and everybody was like, did he actually buy this Moncler jacket? The answer was no. This was made by AI. Why would you pay somebody $15 to $35 for 25 hours to go make this jacket or this fake picture? It turned out it was made in a tool called Midjourney. And Midjourney costs $20 a month here. Midjourney has over $300 million in revenue. It's a brand new company. It's incredible. I would highly recommend everybody check this out. It's not an investment of ours, so it's not self-promotional. It's incredible. Like I say, I want a picture of Winston Churchill playing golf on Mars with FDR, with a lemon in the background. And then boom, 5 seconds later, you've got that. And it's $20 a month. And it doesn't mean that these custom graphics designers are out of a job. It actually means if you talk to many of them, they now use this tool to be able to serve more clients, and then clients that could never afford them before, not even clients, but people can go to Midjourney. Again, this is why we think of this as a known unknown. We know that the market is much, much bigger if we lower the price dramatically. You just don't know how much bigger, and we're showing this now. A couple other examples, education. There was a famous education researcher. He was a professor at University of Chicago. His name was Benjamin Bloom. And he wrote a paper, I encourage everybody to look this up, called the 2 sigma problem, which is basically if you give somebody individualized instruction, they perform 2 standard deviations better. So if you have like the bottom section, the middle section, the top section, you take an average student in the bottom section, you give them one-on-one tutoring, they will perform just as well as an average student in the top section. But it's called the 2 sigma problem because it's too expensive to do this. And what Benjamin Bloom ends his paper with is like, well, this is great that I showed this, I'm summarizing, but it's way too expensive. This is 1984. Now you can do it. You can actually give people individualized instruction. And it's really remarkable. I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old. And these kids, much to the disappointment, I think, of many of their teachers, are using ChatGPT all the time. But they're actually, some of them are using it to cheat. I know this for a fact. It's the killer app of AI. It's cheating. But many of them are actually using it to learn. Like, hey, I'm really confused by this. Can you explain it to me? I'm still confused. Can you give me a few examples? My son was preparing for a math test today, and he used ChatGPT to say, hey, I did all 8 problems that were sample problems. Can you make me another 10 problems that are pretty similar to these? And then boom, it gave him another 10 problems. He worked on all of them. He was able to figure out what he got wrong, and hopefully he'll, knock on wood, do well on the test today. Translation, I bought a new car. I bought a BMW, and I was confused about how to use the self-driving thing. So I looked up the video on YouTube, and I noticed that the video was in one language and one language only, English. Should BMW translate this into Mongolian and Estonian and all sorts of other languages that not very many people speak? The answer is no, because just the cost benefit isn't there. If it cost BMW $2 million a year to translate everything into 400 human languages, would they do it? And it automatically got updated. Everything was correct. They never had to like find, translators and, punish translators if they broke some HR rule or whatever. Yes, they would do it. And again, this is another area where we're seeing massive unlocks in real-time translation. So, I mentioned there's another company called HeyGen that does a version of this, which is very, very cool. But translation is another area of this known unknowns where we'll see a lot more of it as the price goes down dramatically. Or support, United Airlines and Southwest both had very bad problems about 1.5 years ago. Southwest, I think the hold times to rebook your flight in December of 2022 were like 24 hours. And the problem is it's not entirely Southwest's fault because they know that bad weather is coming. That is not their fault. They know they probably should hire some more people. They can't hire 20,000 people and train them on the Southwest system in 14 minutes. That takes 6 months. And then what if the weather is good? Do they fire these people? Like, what do they do? If you can actually have support systems that know everything about your system and have no training time, it allows you to flex up and down so much more quickly. And these support tools, it's not like the old, IVR, the interactive, voice system where it's like, press 1 for this, press 2 for this. And then you're like, agent, this sucks. These tools are very, very good. And in many cases, they answer questions better than humans. And then lastly, I mentioned unknown unknowns. This is kind of the aliens invade. We can't predict this. we're seeing lots of strange things that don't have any kind of economic model. But I'll give you an example. The virtual, PG, virtual boyfriend girlfriend space doesn't make any sense to me. I'm married with kids, but like this is the thing that's growing dramatically. Or there are a couple tools that let you talk to a dead relative. If you ingest all of their writings, you have some recordings, so it can actually talk in their voice. Now you can talk to your grandfather who passed away, which again I find somewhat strange and a little creepy. But you're seeing some things like this where there's not really an economic model. It's not like to the right of that supply-demand equilibrium point, but you kind of know it when you see it. And there's a tool called Character AI, which I would put in this category, where Character has probably tens of millions of users where they just like talking to like virtual friends all day long. It's like, I don't like my friends at school. I want to talk to somebody, some anime character for hours, and now I can. And again, you can't really predict it, but you can observe it. So we think AI is going to be a big deal. Thank you very much for your time. Sorry for running a few minutes over, and great meeting you all.
Please welcome Chief Executive Officer of Rocket Companies, Varun Krishna. Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Amesite, Anne-Marie Sastry. Co-founder, Chairman, and Chief Executive Officer of Acrisure, Greg Williams. And to moderate the discussion, please welcome President and Chief Executive Officer of Crain Communications, Casey Crain.
Good morning. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Morning, everybody. I think that was a perfect introduction into the conversation we're going to have here today. I also think that you all are very intelligent, and you're in store for the best panel of the week. And even if it's not the best panel, I think it's probably one of the most important panels that we can talk about. Our goal today is to demystify artificial intelligence a little bit, to share some stories, and to have a little fun. So Varun, I'm going to kick this off, and I'm going to start with you. Yep. It didn't take you very long to hire a new chief technology officer. You hired Sean with a mandate to oversee the development and implementation of technology across the entire Rocket Companies ecosystem. Talk a little bit about how artificial intelligence will play into that.
Yeah, no, I would say we're very excited to have Sean on board. He is one of the most prolific and insightful minds of our time, and he is someone that has been through helping legacy companies achieve an AI transformation. And the reason that's so important is, any company can be an AI company, but you have to take advantage of the assets that you have. You have to understand that you're not a technology company, you're a data company. That data can be turned into capabilities. You have to be able to think about that internally and externally. And so one of the reasons we're excited to have Sean on board is just that he has led that transformation at Intel, at Thomson Reuters, and through many experiences in the past. And so AI is a flagship top-line imperative across the company, and we're excited to have Sean on board because he's going to be driving that for us.
Awesome. Anne-Marie, good morning.
Morning.
You launched Amesite in 2018 with a mission to improve the way the world learns. At the launch, did you guys consider yourselves an AI company, and how has the use of AI changed your business model over the last 7 years?
In 2018, AI in education placed you squarely in the tinfoil hat crowd. This was not a topic of conversation. We started as an AI-first company with the belief that everyone would, in fact, want and need to be competitive and AI assist in learning, because it so dramatically democratizes the access to personalized learning. In the last 6 years or so, that's gone from writing our own algorithms, using some outside code, to being able to leverage not only things that we've built internally, but we were the first ed tech company to integrate GPT. And that's really captured the public's imagination and caused some fear, which I'm sure we'll talk about on the panel today. But the reality is, once you see AI in action, you realize that in order to be competitive, you have to gain access and learn to utilize the technology. It's been fascinating.
It's almost fun to see people's brains when they start to understand the power.
As an educator, you want to take people from here to here. And being able to use these kinds of tools to do that is incredibly gratifying.
So, Greg, almost 4 years ago, you announced a $400 million acquisition of a Pittsburgh company called Tolko that was a provider of AI. Not a lot of profit, a lot of revenue, a lot of good growth. But what were you seeing at the time in the insurance industry that nobody else was seeing that led you to seek out an AI provider? And how has that worked out for Acrisure?
Well, interesting question, and a bit of a diverse answer or diversion from the question, in the sense that we weren't seeing anything in the insurance industry that was interesting or compelling. And what we had a data analytics capability that was pretty robust. And as we're doing all the things that you can with data analytics and understanding opportunities or trying to spot opportunities, to me, it became very obvious very fast that the predictive elements of AI, we didn't have any component of that in the data analytics tool, as robust as it was. And so it was, look, we need to step and go into a completely different direction. There was nobody we could point to in the insurance space that was doing it. And so it was a journey to go find a capability that didn't exist in the industry, and hence partnering with a firm who had created value in another industry, and partnered with them in order to kind of get what we needed. As far as what it's done, it's transformed literally every facet of our business, from the sales front office and the sales function to the back office and the operating function. It's transformed. I've kind of, through these questions and our dialogue backstage, I've kind of gone back to and reflecting what was life like before we had these tools and this capability, and it's really, it kind of felt like we were operating as a JV team. We've elevated to the varsity team, so to speak, and it's just no going back at this point. It's all forward and very aggressively leaning into what's out there in terms of capabilities.
Yeah. Varun, last month you guys rolled out a new platform called Rocket Logic, allowing customers to upload their documents. Obviously it's a secure portal, but is it supposed to reduce friction for consumers and employees, or a bigger benefit for one or the other?
The Rocket Logic platform is sort of our big bet on AI. And so the way you can think about that is it's like a platform that stretches across every part of the experience, the digital experience that our clients interact with when they come to rocketmortgage.com, the experience that powers the phone conversations that they have with our mortgage bankers to collect data, the experience that powers our underwriting, title, appraisal, and ultimately closing. So it stretches across the entire platform. And it provides sort of automation, machine learning, knowledge engineering, natural language processing, AI capabilities at every segment of the journey. And so if you're a client, it makes it easier for you to provide your documents. It extracts the data from the documents automatically versus manually, so that can be applied to the loan. If you're having a conversation with a mortgage banker, it will take notes on the most important client preferences and insights so that the mortgage banker can focus on the human connection, the emotional connection. When you look at underwriting, it breaks down complex tasks into simple tasks and allows that to be done without as much sophisticated training of underwriting. And then ultimately, it improves things like appraisals with better photo recognition, imaging technology, so that we can get accurate faster. Ultimately, when you think about AI, in some ways, a simple way of saying it is just better predictive analytics than a human could possibly achieve. And what that does is it just automates and simplifies and speeds up the process, which is what really matters in home ownership. You want to be able to be competitive. You don't want to spend a lot of time doing manual tasks. And so it's kind of a perfect fit technology. And so the Rocket Logic platform is really designed to do that. And what it ultimately does is it just saves us time. It allows our team members to be more productive so that they can serve more clients, and allows us to close loans, obviously 2.5 times faster than industry, but we save 150 to 170,000 hours.
Apparently someone's struggling out there with
we love that. Yeah, speed is everything, right?
What's the website?
rocketmortgage.com, right? But speed is the name of the game, and if we can make our team members more productive, they can spend more time serving clients and ultimately grow our business.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit about that efficiency, but we were laughing backstage that there's a lot of fear still out there.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily is AI going to take the job, it's someone using AI
That's right.
is going to probably take the job.
Yeah, this is an interesting topic, and I think, with every big technological revolution of our time that I can think of, we were talking about the evolution of radio, there was a similar fear, the evolution of, the internet, electricity. I mean, everyone thought, oh my gosh, like all these jobs are going to be replaced. And none of that happened. What ended up happening was new job categories, new businesses, new business models were created, and it sort of evolved humanity into a new being. And I definitely think AI is one of those things.
Yeah. Anne-Marie, Amesite talks about one of their categories is business solutions. So how do you guys use AI when it comes to compliance or training? And talk a little bit about how AI can enhance those outcomes.
Absolutely. Quickly, if I could ask the audience, how many of you are using AI now? GPT? Okay, very good.
That's why they're in this room.
That's right.
Everyone out there drinking coffee is in big trouble.
Bring them inside. Bring them inside. Your employees are too. You want them to use AI in a way that advances the interest of the business. And when we think about training and compliance, there are two things that are very important to think about, and that's what we work on. One is making sure that credible information is in front of them. And that means not just using a generic LLM, just not using a generic large language model that hasn't been trained or fine-tuned, but instead using something that's domain-specific. And more importantly, using something that's trained on your own data, because that's what gave you your competitiveness in the first place. The second thing is, and for any professors or teachers in the room, getting them to pay attention. And that means really contextualizing learning and achieving that level of mass customization with an AI that serves that person something that provides context that makes them want to pay attention. That is very powerful. So in business solutions, we're providing, of course, compliance training, of course. We're in 11 countries now and all sorts of subject matters, everybody from frontline folks in manufacturing facilities all the way up to executives. Also, we think it's very important to provide professional solutions for people that's specific to their domain. So recently we rolled out an app called Nurse Magic. And I think everybody in this room wants their healthcare professional to have access to AI, to improve diagnosis, to improve treatment, to help them talk with patients with greater compassion and care. So we're focusing on that tool to really address the need that healthcare professionals have, specifically nurses, to help them be better and advance in their careers and be able to use these tools, but use them with confidence. So we think those two sides of the same coin. Enterprise solutions are very important, but direct-to-consumer professional solutions are also very important.
For sure. Greg, two-part question. Acrisure, it seems like has just exploded as of late. The last couple of years have been unbelievable. You talked a little bit about efficiency, and when it comes to streamlining the process, similar to what Rocket's doing. Give us a specific example of how an employee interacts with one of the platforms, but then also if you could talk a minute about how it's a growth driver as well.
Yeah, so if you look at, if you're a sales professional at Acrisure today, actually I'll go back, if you went back 3 or 4 years ago, your day was consumed with, they'd have loved a place like this, by the way. It's a target-rich environment, a lot of decision makers, a lot of business owners, senior level
Stuck on an
executives.
island.
Stuck on an island. I mean, this was like, shooting fish in a barrel if you're a good sales professional. But they were kind of dependent on, I'll call it the Chamber of Commerce breakfast, lunch, and dinner in terms of establishing contacts and relationships. Well, fast forward from that environment to today, and literally the ability for us to take a sales professional and their expertise that they have, a product and service that they're capable of selling and advising a client with, we're finding audiences and targeting those audiences for them. So if you're a sales professional today, you came to work, there's 23 things, 23 prospects, 23 sales opportunities. We defined that for them and said, here's the 23 things. And by the way, here's a ranking of probability of what you're likely to sell to whom. And so we went from, I've got to establish a relationship one person at a time, to we're now teeing up by the dozens of opportunities. So it's kind of, we'll say paint by numbers, but it's kind of paint by numbers. And so we're helping our sales professionals in that regard and identify a targeted audience. If you take it to the client side, I'll use California. I know we're in Michigan, but I'll use California example because it's an extreme example. There's 2,100 health plans in the state of California. So if you're an entrepreneur or business owner and you want to know what's your best solution for employee benefits for your employees, there's 2,100 options. Well, there's no sales professional in the world that's going to come and be proficient in 2,100 different solutions or opportunities. And so what they're selling and presenting is the 5 or 6 they actually know. Well, we're using the technology now to literally, based on size of company, needs, budgets and budget constraints, and the things that the client's trying to look for and solve as relates to the business as well as their employees. And we were basically going through 2,100 alternatives and actually giving them the 5 or 6 best options that are available to them by looking at all 2,100, as opposed to just the 5 or 6 a sales professional was actually able to talk about. And so we're helping clients in a way in terms of design and outcomes that we would never be able to help them with before. And by the way, even in the 5 or 6 deep dive kind of solutions that you might present to a client in the old days, that's weeks of preparation and analysis and presentations and so forth. The technology and tool, literally we do it in front of the client. So of the 2,100, here's your options. Here's what they are, here's who they are, here's the plans, here's the cost, here's the presentation. We'll print it out while we're at your office. And so it takes weeks down to like literally minutes. And so it's those are some of the examples of how we're using the technology in AI. And again, the AI component is the predictive modeling about that business and what they're likely going to want, not just their expression of interest, but what they're likely going to actually want and use going forward based on profile and capabilities and scale, et cetera.
And Greg, give us a ballpark of the type of growth you've seen in the last 36 months.
So we have, in the last 36 months, we'll finish this year about $5 billion in revenue. 36 months ago, we were a little north of $2 billion. So we've more than doubled in size in the last 36 months.
It's incredible. So Varun, is your board expecting that kind of growth based on AI? And joking aside, when you guys think about it, you mentioned the appraisal process, but what do you actually think it can do for your business?
I mean, I think the potential is limitless. I truly believe that. In housing, it's like the biggest total addressable market there is. $1.5 trillion on the low end, up to $2 trillion on the high end. There just aren't markets that are that big in general, in any industry. And there's no player that has more than a single-digit market share, and that includes us. And so our focus is to leverage technology to drive growth in market share, because there's plenty of share, really independently of whether rates are up or down or inventory is up or down. People still want to buy and sell homes, and if you can make that process as frictionless as possible, then you can drive incredible growth. So there's lots of market there. We think AI, again, just this simple concept of leveraging technology, machine learning to do better pattern recognition is a simple strategy, but incredibly effective in transforming the nature of buying and selling a home. So we're very excited about our growth prospects. There's a huge total addressable market. When you think about not just mortgage, but you throw in home ownership at large, real estate, financial services, it's a $5 trillion market, and that's in current economics. So we're excited about this just because we're at this sort of precipice of being able to take a giant leap forward with technology. And the technology, we think, is a perfect fit for the kind of business that we have. Business of data, business of humanity, a business of automation and workflow, and deterministic outcomes.
Yeah. Anne-Marie, you've got a pretty extensive background in technology and innovation. We're talking about big data, we're talking about huge companies. What do you think are some of the less obvious ways that AI can help transform some more traditional business practices?
It's in people. Bottom line, the biggest market there is selling things to human beings. And the reality is every single person in this room, your job will change with a rapidity that's pretty disorienting, jaw-dropping in the next year to 5 years. Fastest changes we've seen, really, in my opinion, in human experience. So when you look at the unseen opportunities, they really come down to my view, how are people operating differently? What decisions are people making differently? When we look at this, we look at healthcare as an example, and we say, okay, you could attack this problem of all hospitals in the United States of America or all healthcare facilities in general. Or you can look at some of the biggest groups, like nurses, 5.2 million nurses. Don't you want your nurse to have an AI? Don't you want to get a faster response? Don't you want to get a more compassionate response? Do you really want to force your healthcare professional to be on the job mentored by multiple people in order to deliver a good response or give that person a head start in delivering a good response? The answer is, of course you want that person to have that technology. And there are many fields like this. When we look at our university market, we've rolled out systems across the country so that universities can offer professional learning. And we've recently announced late last year a no-fee setup deal, which was very appealing to universities. So we closed a bunch of those deals, and that's exciting, and it helps them scale. There's also 15 million people going to college and involved in higher education. And we look at the kids who are getting ready to go to college, and we say, don't you want to interact with a faculty member in a way that makes it easy for you to interact and that learning is supported? Don't you want to be more competitive in your application to college? Don't you want to be exposed to being able to generate original content before you start that college journey? So we look at all these critical points and say, can we put a solution there that makes you into someone with a superpower? Can we give you an Iron Man suit? And that's what we're really excited about. And we think that, you know, your head goes to enterprise solutions, and those are extremely important. We think about the people and giving them these sort of superpowers.
It's a good way to put it. You know, we're talking about AI as if it's perfect. It's nowhere near perfect. And at the current iterations, you know, the platforms, we've all seen, you know, small issues. But Greg, when you guys think about it inside your business, how do you protect against incorrect information? We know how important data in, data out, right? But how do you guard against AI incorrectly denying someone coverage or you know, incorrectly identifying healthcare or health insurance?
Yeah. Well, the good news is we're not the actual insurance provider, so that's the good news. If someone gets denied coverage, it's not our fault, so it's not our problem. No, seriously and truthfully, you know, from our perspective, it's a constant. The needs of the client are first and foremost. The appetite of the carrier and insurance marketplace, it's a matching and aligning of that. And so that's how we've focused on how we bring technology, you know, to the fore in an efficient way to do the most good, recognizing that there are risks in using, you know, powerful tools. You know, bad actors will do bad things, but at the end of the day, there's, you know, some nobility, not to you know, elevate it too much, but there's some nobility in what we're doing, that we're helping people, and for us, it's being very monitored and controlled about how tools and languages, large language models, how they're being trained and how they're being used, so that we ensure that it's always good, and in terms of what the intent is and what the outcome is. And so, just as a few words, you have to be aware,
Yeah.
and understand the risks and the downside, and just make sure you have a culture that has no tolerance for anything that even comes close to towing the line of impropriety or something that's going to be harmful.
Sure. Varun, we're up on an island in northern Michigan. This conference is about Michigan and business. You've got a background in Silicon Valley. When you think about what Rocket needs to do specifically in Michigan and what Michigan companies more broadly need to do when it comes to AI, does it feel like Michigan is a bit behind? And is there an opportunity or a shift in order for all of us to catch up?
Yeah, I think.
And if you were watching that video before, I think the answer is clearly yes.
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting is, in some ways, it's not about Michigan versus any other part of the state, or the country, or the world. I think everyone's a little bit behind. And I think the good news is this AI revolution, in some ways, is a bit of an equalizer. And I think what it will do is it will allow the barrier to entry to become lower, which means it's going to become easier to catch up and to be able to grow and accelerate. And the pace of change and the pace of specifically nonlinear growth, in my opinion, is going to accelerate. And I think the key to that is just a couple of things. I think the first thing is just continuing to be outside in. I mean, you heard it from Dan, you heard it from Alex, and from many of the other panelists, is that just keep learning from the outside world. Like, let's focus on bringing talent to our great state, and let's continue, which is now my new home. And let's also focus on nurturing talent within our state, right? And I'm a product of an internship program that allowed me to get my first job, and that entry point is so important. And if we can cultivate technology programs for early career, entry-level roles in technology, I mean, to me, that's a flywheel that will continue to be perpetually self-rewarding. But I don't believe that we're behind at all. I just think that we have all the ingredients to not just catch up, but everyone else isn't playing the same game of catch up, including Silicon Valley. And so building a technology-centric culture, investing in a startup-centric environment, investing in early career talent, investing in building solid programs for interns to be able to transition into tech companies. As Dan likes to say, keeping folks in this state, attracting talent. I think just simple recipes for how we're going to catch up and then how we're going to grow. But I think the potential is all there.
And I think we heard from the panel before that that's what these kids are looking for. Very quickly, we're out of time, but I want to touch on these last two questions. Marie, when you think about ethical considerations, Greg touched on it a little bit. You've got to have a balance between innovation and responsibility. As you guys look at it from your business, how do you approach it?
It's core to our business because we're about cultivation of talent. And intrinsic in that is the responsibility to deliver good information, to deliver deliver solutions that come from ratified sources, that are trained on ratified sources. So you're sitting next to somebody at a ball game, it's fine if they have an opinion. Not so good if they're a healthcare professional. Not so good if they're a professional that is doing something that has a high consequence to your health and safety. And definitely not good if you're nurturing someone to become a professional or even to get into college. So really thinking about the sources of information that we use to curate data. And this is an example of where capitalism and ethics are highly aligned, because you can't be competitive if you're using sources of information that don't differentiate you, that don't give you some substantial advantage in understanding your sector. So it's not opposed to what we need to do to grow businesses, to get information that's highly qualified, and that's where we really have to think. In terms of how we deploy the technology, we made some big mistakes in social media. Yeah. We made some very big mistakes. And the way to avoid those now is to think about rules about how we deploy the technology and what the purposes are. And I think we see some good progress there in government.
For sure. And then Greg, finally, very quickly, what advice would you give to other business leaders considering the adoption of AI tech within their own companies?
Get started. You can't start fast enough. In this world, if you're behind today, you're going to be really behind tomorrow. And so that would be my advice, is you just can't wait to get in the game. The rate and the pace of acceleration and growth and capability, once you have data and information and an AI tool, large language models, et cetera, yeah. The rate at which it learns is so rapid that if you're waiting to get started, you're already way behind and probably not going to catch up, frankly. And so when I say that, the urgency, like don't leave the island without figuring out how am I going to invest in this. When we made our investment in 2019, it was a joint venture with an AI firm that we ended up buying out in 2020. It was a $400 million investment. We had no EBITDA. We acquired a company that had no earnings. Everyone thought I was nuts. We had people questioning the wisdom of investing in a capability that has no profits for a company like us that had leverage and so forth that rating agencies and others were weighing in on. They literally, we had people, on the board, we actually had 2 board members abstain, didn't vote yes or no, they abstained. They thought, look, this is nuts. 4 years later, no one thinks we were nuts. In fact, they're thankful that we got started 4 years ago. So that'd be my advice, get started.
Well, I hope they'll have us back next year because the world will have changed a hell of a lot by the time we're sitting here a year from now. Ladies and gentlemen, how about a round of applause for our great panel? Thanks, guys.
Thank you.